Hi, I'm Neil Douglas and I live near Masterton, New Zealand. I'm sitting on the deck that George designed. Well, he gave my builder Jeff strict instructions about the gap between the boards. I met George in the early to mid 1990s. This was through Barry Garnham, who headed the Sydney Railways. George became Chief Economist. He's the only chief I've ever known. George was always dressed like a chief. Smart black suit and tie with impeccably polished black boots. Never had laces. And invariably had a cigar at lunchtime from a shop we walked to at the top of George Street. George had a good relationship with Barry, who was an Arsenal supporter. So, as George used to say, he was always going to do this and he was always going to do that. But George was a true economist, and he'd say, "No, it's not economical, Barry. We're not going to do that." Barry appreciated this, as many of his tribe were yes men. It all turned to custard round about 2010, when the wise government of New South Wales decided to lobotomise the railway, and Transport for New South Wales took over. There, economics didn't matter so much. George departed. I still kept in touch, as we were two economic soulmates, complaining about the state of the world. We went to a transport conference called the Australian Transport Research Forum. That happened every year. And one year, we won the Best Paper Award for station crowding. Here it is. Another copy of this award used to hang proudly on George's office wall. George was a keen football man. Despite being a little shade under 6'6" tall, George told me he was the very best centre-back Canberra University ever had. And I recall that one of his most animated periods was 2004, when Greece won the Euros. Not only did his beloved Greek team win, they won in the most economical fashion, scoring a miserly 7 goals in the whole campaign. I've also been to the island of Kos. George invited us to help celebrate his niece's wedding. And we went there and had a wonderful time and experienced Greek hospitality in situ. I've been to George's home in Hurstville a few times. I met his 2 sons and 2 daughters. Lovely people. And I've experienced Greek hospitality. As George told me many times, Greeks do the best baked beans in the world. New Zealand's Watties baked beans do not compare. I also met George's mild-mannered cat. Now, when George came over here to my 50th a couple of years ago, he encountered our cat, Monty. George loved our Monty, and Monty loved George. Well, George's leather jacket, and tore a strip of George's $1,000 jacket. Now, I spoke to George a few weeks ago, and he was enthusiastic about coming over with Faye to see us again. Unfortunately, Monty died a few years ago, but we've got a relative of Monty called Percy, and I was explained to George that he'd love to see Percy too. Sadly, both me and Percy and Barbara, my partner, aren't going to see George, and we're going to miss him a lot. But I've got great memories of George, and those memories will live on with me to the end of me. George may have been economical in his profession, but it was generosity itself when it came to his friends, family, and colleagues. And we all are indebted to George for that. I wish George's family and Faye the very best. Here's a glass of red wine. Say goodbye.